It's such a great pleasure for me to be here in Edmonton. This is my first time in Alberta and actually the western part of Canada. And so I'm very, very pleased to have been asked to come for this really significant inauguration of the competitiveness movement here in Alberta. But I believe you also are going to be the anchors for the all Canada competitiveness movement. So congratulations, Premier and Minister, for your vision and for all the private sector leaders who've come here today with government. Clearly, the Alberta Competitiveness Act is very visionary. It's embodying, the whole concept of the public-private partnership and how the government's enabling conditions combined with the innovation, the drive, and the risk-taking of the private sector can really propel Alberta into the next phase of its prosperity agenda, but most importantly, how this province is going to relate and work with Canada, in North America, in the Americas, and the world at large. I hope my comments today and perspective will really contribute to your work, and very importantly, as we discussed last night, I think there's already, from my perspective, a whole area of potential partnerships between the U.S. Council and the groups here and in Canada at large, and I look forward to developing that. As Doug said, the U.S. Council on Competitiveness is almost 25 years old. We were really shaped in a time of great anxiety and technological challenges in the United States. I was actually in the Reagan White House at the time, and if you look back at that period, 1986, it was the first time since World War II that the United States had faced a serious challenge to its global economic position. Foreign goods were overtaking U.S. goods, not only in our marketplace, but globally, and particularly in the areas of high-tech sectors that we'd actually invented and pioneered in the world. At the same time, our productivity growth was very, very low. We had huge unemployment, and inflation was very high, and our standard of living was slipping. And we were still facing formidable national security threats on the front of the Cold War. Japan had emerged as a formidable competitor and was challenging the United States in everything from autos to consumer electronics to machine tools and the building blocks of the burgeoning IT revolution, namely semiconductors. At the same time, this Japanese challenge motivated many American producers to really look internally at their own competitiveness and to embrace new manufacturing methods that cut costs, improved quality, and boosted productivity. Indeed, this really led to the quality movement in the United States that transformed our manufacturing. Ultimately, the market rivalry between the U.S. and Japan demonstrated an axiom about the effects of competition, and that is that it makes companies more competitive and a country's economy more productive. So the Council on Competitiveness was an outgrowth of the Commission on Industrial Competitiveness that President Reagan formed. He asked a very dynamic CEO leader, John Young, the CEO of Hewlett-Packard at the time, to chair that commission. And they worked on the factors that would impact our growth and our technological challenges. And this was the first time, actually, the word competitiveness even emerged in the lexicon, and was the first time the U.S. government began to ask some very important questions. What is competitiveness? How do you define it? And how do you achieve it? When the work of the Competitiveness Productivity Commission was over, John Young became an innovator, because this is what he did. And I recently had the pleasure to spend some time with John Young to really ask him about his vision for the creation of the council. And he said to me, I felt there needed to be a group of leaders across the sectors of our economy that were willing to step up above their own interests and come together around the great purpose of the future of our country. So the actual creation of the council, as totally private sector led, but joining with government in and of itself was a great innovation, because John brought together the top CEOs across every sector with our leading university presidents and brought in labor leaders. And also said this group has to be nonpartisan, It has to be a nonprofit. It cannot be a trade association. And at the end of the day, it has to be willing to tackle the hard challenges. A few years ago, one of our chairmen, Dwayne Ackerman, the CEO of Bell South, at one of our meetings, we were talking about some very difficult issues. And he said, you know, I was thinking about the importance of the Council on Competitiveness and why we all come to the table. You know, Bell South, now of course part of AT&T, that, you know, we all have our trade associations, we all have our groups we work with. But I was thinking last night that if a group of leaders like us do not look into the future to try to understand what is happening, why it's happening, and what it means, and do something about it, who's going to do that? And that's a very important question. Who is going to do it? Now, we've at the U.S. Council learned some key lessons in our almost 2 decades of life. And that is that our definition of productivity and competitiveness still stands strong. And let me just cite it for you. It's very similar, of course, to what your definition is that you've come up with that you'll be discussing today. And that is that a nation's competitiveness depends on its increase in productivity while maintaining and growing a high standard of living for all its citizens and succeeding in global markets. How do we do our work? Well, we have to have processes to do our work, and we've developed some very significant ones in the Council on Competitiveness. I've mentioned we analyze emerging challenges. We want and are the group, we believe, in the United States that's always looking over the horizon, not just looking at what's going on today. We convene leaders that can envision and implement solutions. We are very selective about our leadership. We want dynamic leaders, we want charismatic leaders, we want leaders who do things. And we organize ourselves for action. So in our evolving agenda, we do educate policymakers. We do work and educate and partner with the media and the public through our high-profile conferences, our signature publications, our policy recommendations, and our special analyses on cutting-edge issues, and very importantly, our engagement with competitiveness councils around the world. One of the most challenging things about competitiveness, and I think we've already heard that this morning, is that it encompasses such a wide range of factors that it has to cut across the stovepipe missions of government, of industry, of academia, of all these groups, including civil society. And so you really have to think, if you're going to be an active competitiveness council and forum, about being both a systems integrator and a systems challenger. So we strive to represent the voice of competitiveness and innovation in a wide range of areas. Everything from technology to trade, education, energy, international decision-making, and national security as well. Doug mentioned the National Innovation Initiative. This was launched in 2004, and it was a very important time for the United States. We were still doing very well, had very high productivity issues, but we sensed and knew that the world was changing. And we wanted to understand, what really will 21st century innovation be? And then, what does that mean to the United States, and what do we need to do about it? We knew by then that we could not compete on standardized products and services, on low-cost wages. We had to create premium products that could command a premium in the global marketplace. So we asked some great leaders to join us. Sam Palmisano, the CEO of IBM, led this initiative with Wayne Clough, the president of Georgia Tech. And we brought together over 14 months about 800 leaders across the country who organized themselves around task force issues that related to the building blocks of talent, investment, and infrastructure. We released our report at a big national summit in 2004 called Innovate America that set this roadmap for what the nation needed to do, and also really engendered the innovation movement globally. And we're very proud that the American Competes legislation that was signed by President Bush in 2008 is the last piece of bipartisan legislation in our Senate. I shouldn't say we're proud about that, because we'd like to have more bipartisan legislation, but it was really a bellwether act.